The silence in the house felt deeper now. Hungrier. My father had rewritten history. Split me in half. Buried a name. Built a new one. I remembered things I didn't know I knew. A pink blanket. A song hummed by my mother. Standing at the top of the stairs, calling for someone who never answered. He told her I died. He told me I never existed. He burned the memory. But he couldn't destroy it. The next night, I lit a fire in the fireplace. I placed the tapes inside, one by one. Not to forget. Not to destroy. But to choose. To burn the lie before it burned me. As the plastic cracked and hissed in the flames, the ticking in the walls stopped. The house exhaled. And for the first time in days I slept. I dreamed of the girl one final time. We stood in the stairwell together, side by side. Same eyes. Same breath. Same history. "Thank you," she said, reaching out to take my hand. "You remembered me." And then she let go, and walked up the stairs alone. When I woke, the house was still. No ticking. No creaks. Just morning light through the windows, soft and forgiving. I walked up the stairs. The middle step, the one she always sat on, was empty. But carved into the wood now, barely visible unless you looked hard, was a single word. Eleanor. I didn't leave the house that day. Or the next. There was still more to uncover. Because if my father had lied about her, and about me, what else had he buried in these walls? And who, exactly, was the version of me he tried to create? They say identity is a story we tell ourselves. But what if the story we tell isn't ours to begin with? What if someone wrote it for us, edited it, deleted pages, scribbled over the parts that didn't fit? What if your whole life was just a version someone else needed you to believe? After Eleanor faded, after I remembered her, the house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt unfinished. As if the last act of a play had been cut short, leaving the audience in the dark. But something still pulsed in the walls. A presence. A pressure. The kind of silence that meant a secret hadn't been fully exhumed. And I could feel it, him, lurking in the margins. My father. The man who raised me. The man who renamed me. The man who, in some twisted act of mercy or madness, tried to erase who I was before I could remember. It started with the basement. I hadn't dared to go down there. Even after everything I'd uncovered, the grave, the girl, the tapes. There was something about those stairs that made my stomach knot. The smell of rot and cold. The sensation of descending into someone else's memories. But on the 8th day, I found the key. It was tucked in the spine of one of his journals, wedged in with brittle newsprint and a letter I wasn't ready to read yet. The key was black iron. Smooth, worn from use. On the tag, JH, Workshop. I stood at the basement door for an hour before I turned the lock. The air hit me like old breath, metallic, stale, and tinged with oil. The light bulb flickered overhead as I stepped down into the dark, each creaking board a protest. What I found wasn't a basement. It was a laboratory. Not clinical, personal. A space built by obsession. Workbenches covered in diagrams. Blueprints. Newspaper clippings pinned to the wall. Books about neuroplasticity. Memory transfer. Identity trauma. There were psychology texts, government reports, even old tape reels labeled by year. Subject EH///progress review. And internal conflict ///dissociative reversion. And there, in the center of the room, was a mannequin. Not just a mannequin, a replica. My size, my shape. Worn clothes. A face roughly sculpted from plaster, features blurred, uncanny. I backed away, bow rising in my throat. What the hell had he been doing down here? There was a notebook on the table. A different kind. Leather-bound. Clean pages. My father's handwriting, neat, methodical, like a surgeon. Joseph Holloway. Personal log, entry 1. Eleanor is slipping. I see it in her eyes. She remembers too much. She hears things. Recalls memories that do not belong to her. I've tried the pills, therapy, isolation. None of it holds. She looks at me now like she knows. I can't lose another. I won't. Another entry weeks later. Entry 4. We had a son. His name was Jonas. He died before Eleanor was born. But she says his name in her sleep. She draws his face. My wife won't speak of it. She started calling Eleanor by his name when she thinks I'm not listening. I don't know if she's breaking, or if I am. And the last one. Entry 12. I've made the decision. She can't stay Eleanor. It's killing her. The duality. The slippage. If the mind can be guided, perhaps the soul can too. A clean name. A new script. Jonas was real. Maybe she can be him now. Maybe she can be whole. I dropped the book like it bit me. The workshop blurred around me. My pulse pounded in my ears. I sat on the cold concrete, head in my hands, and tried to breathe. He hadn't just rewritten my name, he'd rewritten me. Frankensteined his grief and guilt into a living child. Reassigned identity like a file. Buried one life beneath another. Jonas Holloway. That was supposed to be my name. That was the name he gave me after Eleanor began to fracture. After she became too haunted by lives she couldn't have lived. Including his dead son. I wasn't adopted. I wasn't a twin. I was a reboot. An attempt at erasure. And in trying to kill the memory of Eleanor, he made me carry both. The next day, I read the letter. It was addressed to J. No return address. No date. You said she remembered things she couldn't have known. That she dreamed of fire before the nursery ever burned. That she looked at you with eyes too old. She's not broken, Joseph. She's echoing. You tried to divide something that was never meant to be split. You can't save her by pretending she's someone else. You can't bury a ghost in a name. Let her go. Or she'll take him with her. It wasn't signed. But I recognized the handwriting. My mother's. That night, I stood on the staircase again. No Eleanor. Just the sound of the wind against the glass. But something in the wood felt warmer now. Like the house was starting to forgive itself. I sat on the middle step, the one she always claimed, and I whispered to the empty air. I remember. Both of you. And I meant it. In the days that followed, I began to write. Everything. From the first time I saw the girl on the stairs, to the fire, to the lies he told. I wrote like my life depended on it. Because maybe it did. Because healing isn't forgetting. It's remembering correctly. It's looking at the scar and saying, you happened. And I survived you. I buried the mannequin. In the woods behind the house. I dug the hole with my bare hands, covered it with salt and ash and every page of my father's journal. Not out of anger, but so no one would ever try to replace a ghost with a child again. I left the house a week later. Not because it was finished, but because I was. I took only one thing with me, the pocket watch. Still cracked. Still ticking. Still whispering in its quiet way. You were both. And you survived. You don't leave a place like that. Not really. Even after the door clicks shut behind you, even after the dust settles and your hands stop trembling, something lingers. A whisper in the chest. A weight in the blood. It comes with you, quiet and watchful. The truth doesn't stay buried. And neither do the dead. I rented a small apartment in Burlington. Nothing special. White walls, scuffed floors, the kind of place where no one asks questions. That's what I needed. A blank page. But the silence followed me. Not loud. Not cruel. Just her. Eleanor. It started in the mornings. A hum, low and familiar, threading through the steam of my coffee. I'd catch it mid-note, the same tune I'd heard in dreams. It didn't come from any direction. It came from inside. Like memory had found a voice again. Then came the handwriting. Not mine. In the margins of my journals, in the grocery list taped to the fridge. Words scrawled in looping script I hadn't used since childhood. We used to love lilacs. Don't forget the blue ribbon. I'm still here. I'd wake up with ink smudged on my hands, pen on the pillow. Sometimes whole pages filled with memories I didn't remember writing. Her voice. In my voice. Her hand. Through mine. I went back to therapy. I didn't say the word possession, but I didn't need to. My therapist, a kind woman named Celine, listened like she was digging gently into a grave. So this Eleanor, she said, flipping through my intake notes. Do you feel like she's someone else? I hesitated. She's me, I said finally. But also not. She's the part one wasn't allowed to be. Celine nodded like she understood. But how could she? Eleanor wasn't a metaphor. She was a heartbeat that kept thudding in my chest. Some nights I'd wake up and find things moved in the apartment. The pocket watch on the windowsill. A blue flower pressed between the pages of a book I hadn't opened in years. A drawing taped to the bathroom mirror, crayon lines, a staircase, and two figures. One tall, one small, both with no faces. She was still with me. Not trapped. Not vengeful. Just unfinished. I called my aunt one afternoon, my father's estranged sister. We hadn't spoken in over a decade. Her voice cracked with surprise when she heard mine. I always wondered if you'd call, she said. I didn't ask why. I already knew. You knew about her, I said. Didn't you? Silence. Then, softly, he told us she died in the fire. That there was nothing left. That it was better not to talk about it. And you believed him? I wanted to. But I knew your mother. And I knew the look in her eyes when she stopped saying your name. That shook me. I asked what she meant. She started calling you Eleanor again, she said. At the very end. My mother. She'd been quiet for most of my life. Withdrawn. Soft-spoken. I remembered her as a kind of ghost herself, there, but never fully present. And now I understood why. She hadn't forgotten me. She was mourning me, even while I stood right in front of her. I visited her grave the next day. Took the watch with me. The journal too. Placed them on the soil like offerings. Not to beg forgiveness, but to say I found her. She's safe now. The wind picked up as I stood there. Cold and sweet. And for a moment I swear I heard her voice, clearer than it ever was in life. You remembered her. That's all I ever wanted. That night I stopped running. I lit candles in the apartment. Brought out the old drawings, the photographs, the tapes I'd made from my own voice, retellings of the story, whispered like lullabies into the recorder. I sat in the middle of the floor and said her name out loud. Eleanor. Over and over. Not like a summoning. Like a return. And then I felt her. Not in the room. In me. Like a shiver through my spine. Like a breath filling my lungs. Not as a ghost. But as memory finally given shape. I stood. Walked to the mirror. And for the first time, looked at myself not as a victim. Not as a puzzle. Not as a broken draft of someone else's grief. But as both. Jonas and Eleanor. Boy and girl. Daughter and son. Someone who had been split and survived. I don't hear the ticking anymore. But sometimes, when I walk by a staircase, any staircase, I pause. Half expecting to see her there. And sometimes I do. Just a flicker. Just a smile. And she always looks peaceful now. Like she knows I'm no longer running from her. We weren't meant to be separate. We were a story my father couldn't bear to finish. But I finished it. And I'm still writing. There's a strange thing that happens when you begin to live as your whole self. The silence inside you shifts. Not into noise, but into clarity, like a radio tuning between static and signal. You begin to notice what was always missing. The shadows in your reflection. The way the mirror always felt a degree too cold. Like it was showing only the part of you that was allowed to be seen. Now, when I look in the mirror, I don't see Jonas. And I don't just see Eleanor. I see both. not as contradictions, but as coexistence. As truth, finally reclaimed. The week after my mother's grave, something changed. Not in me, in the world around me. I started seeing doubles. A pair of shoes by the door I don't remember owning, but that fit like memory. A children's book on my shelf, the kind my mother used to read when I was too old for bedtime stories. And one morning, carved into the condensation of my bathroom mirror. Try again. Look deeper. I knew it was her. Eleanor. Still guiding me. Still helping me remember. I took a road trip back to the coast. The last place I remembered feeling like myself. Or someone close to it. The sea air hit me like a revelation. Salt and ghost light and something like forgiveness. I found the beach where my mother and I used to walk when the house got too loud. I couldn't have been more than 6, maybe 7, but I remembered her humming, the rhythm of our footsteps, how she never let go of my hand. It was always just us. My father never came. I stood there for hours, waiting for something I couldn't name. And it came. Not a voice. Not a vision. A feeling. Like someone stepped into my skin. And I heard a sentence rise in my blood like a tide. He never saw the real you. But she did. I started journaling again. Seriously. Not just notes, or flashes of memory, but whole entries. Pages written in the voice I hadn't used since I was a child. It was Eleanor's voice, but also mine. Not fiction. Not hallucination. Integration. Reclaiming every version of myself that had been silenced. Celine, my therapist, noticed the shift. "You're not running anymore," she said one day, as I sat across from her, notebook in my lap. "You're letting her speak." I nodded, because I finally believe she's not dangerous. She never was. She was just waiting for me to stop being afraid of her. One night, I stood in front of the mirror and asked aloud, "Who am I now?" Not in despair. In curiosity. And the answer came, not in words, but in memory. Of a little girl spinning in the hallway, arms out, dress catching the light like wings. Of a little boy sitting in the dark, hiding his drawings so his father wouldn't see. Of a child who was never given the chance to choose. I whispered to the mirror, "I'm both. And I'm still becoming." A few days later, I got a call. My aunt. She was cleaning out her garage and found something she thought I should have, a photo album. From when my mother was pregnant. She hid it from him. She said, her voice soft. I think she wanted to keep a piece of that time just for herself. When the package arrived, I opened it on the floor, lights low, the watch ticking beside me like a metronome. Inside were photos I'd never seen. My mother. Young. Glowing. And in every picture, written in the margin, the same 3 letters. YH. She knew. She always knew. Even before the fire. Even before he rewrote the script. She saw Eleanor. And she loved her. The last photo in the album made my breath hitch. My father, sitting in the nursery, holding a baby. Expression blank. Distant. But what chilled me wasn't his face. It was the way he held me, arms tense, like he didn't want to let go, but also couldn't bring himself to fully touch me. Like I was already slipping away. That night I lit a candle in front of the mirror. Not for a seance. Not for drama. For witnessing. I looked at my reflection and said out loud, "I am not your erasure. I am not your second chance. I am me." The mirror didn't answer. But something did shift. Like the room exhaled. Like my bones settled into their real shape. I saw myself, not in fragments, not in masks, but as a whole person. One who had been split. And survived. I don't see Eleanor on the stairs anymore. Because I've invited her back into the house. She no longer needs to haunt me to be heard. Her voice lives in my breath. Her name in my blood. Her memories in my bones. Some nights I still dream of the house. But now, it's different. She's there, yes. But she's smiling. Not sad. Not waiting. Free. It was early spring when I went back. The house stood exactly as I left it. The paint still peeling. The porch still bowed. But it didn't feel like it was watching me anymore. It felt like it was waiting. Not for an ending, but for peace. I parked at the edge of the gravel driveway and stared up at the second-story windows, half expecting her silhouette, the girl, the echo, the lost half of me, to be standing there. But there was no figure. No hum of invisible breath. Only light. Warm. Pale. Still. I stepped through the front door and stood in the entryway for a long time. The air was cool, dustless. Like something had aired out in my absence. The staircase looked smaller than I remembered. The step where she always sat was just a step now. No shimmer. No pull. Just worn wood under the sunlight. I ran my hand along the railing, felt the grain. No chill. No grief. Just memory, clean and quiet. The house wasn't haunted anymore. Because I wasn't. Upstairs, the office still held the remnants of his world, my father's journals, the scent of old tobacco, the half-curled photographs pinned to the wall. But they didn't feel like artifacts of pain anymore. They felt like context. Evidence of a man who couldn't love what he didn't understand. Who feared the child he made more than the silence he left behind. I stood at his desk and touched the cracked leather of his final notebook. I didn't open it. Not because I couldn't, but because I no longer needed to. I'd already lived the unwritten pages. There was one last thing I needed to do. Something Eleanor had whispered to me, once, in a dream. You have to unlock the attic. The attic had always been bolted. Even when I was a child, it was a place of no-go. Not in a threatening way, just in that quiet, final way some parents make a thing untouchable. As though what lived inside wasn't dangerous, just unbearable. The key was still in the basement. Still tucked in the rusted tin box under the workbench where I'd found so many other pieces of the story. I climbed the attic stairs slowly. Each creak felt sacred. The doors swung open with a breath of dry warmth. Not decay. Not mildew. Just time, trapped in wood and dust. The attic was small, beams exposed, light streaming through slats in the wall. But what caught me wasn't the space. It was the room within the room. A tiny corner, sectioned off by a curtain of lace. A child's space. Not a nursery. Not quite a hiding place. A memory. There was a mattress, no bigger than a cot. A trunk filled with dresses, all carefully folded. Drawings taped to the wood-paneled walls. Stars. Clocks. A house. A staircase. And in the center, a mirror. Not dusty. Not cracked. Polished. Waiting. I sat cross-legged in front of it and stared at my reflection. No duality now. No confusion. Just my face. All of it. The softness I once buried. The ache I once ignored. The girl I once was. The boy I was told to become. The person I chose to be. I reached into the trunk and pulled out the smallest dress. Held it in my lap like a folded secret. And I wept. Not from grief. From recognition. I spent the night in the attic. Slept on the old mattress with the window cracked, stars peeking through. And I dreamed of her, not as a child, not as a ghost, but as me, walking the halls of the house, barefoot and unafraid. When I woke, the sky was lavender. Morning inching in. I rose. Stretched. And whispered, "You can rest now." I locked the attic behind me, not to seal it away, but to honor it. Some places aren't meant to be left open. They're meant to be remembered. With reverence. With truth. With love. The final thing I did before leaving was carve her name into the doorframe at the bottom of the stairs. Eleanor Holloway. Not hidden. Not buried. A name returned to the walls that once refused to hold it. A name finally spoken. I stood in the doorway one last time, keys in hand. And before I stepped out into the morning, I looked over my shoulder and said, "This house doesn't need to forget." And I meant it. Because neither did I. People ask me sometimes if I believe in ghosts, and I tell them, I believe in the parts of us that refuse to be silenced. Because that's what a ghost really is. Not some specter in the dark, but a truth too loud to stay dead. Eleanor was never haunting me. She was waiting for me to remember her, for me to become her. And now, we are no longer separate. Names are strange things. They feel permanent, like anchors, tethering us to families, histories, the expectations of others. But they're just sounds we learn to answer to. Labels we're handed before we even have language. My father gave me a name. My mother whispered another. But neither belonged to me completely. Not until now. After I left the house for the last time, I didn't go back to Burlington. I drove south, windows down, letting the wind strip away whatever hadn't already been shed. No destination. No plan. Just the road and a quiet in my chest that didn't feel empty, it felt earned. I drove until the sun set, and when I pulled into a roadside motel, I looked at the clerk behind the desk and, for the first time, used my voice without hesitation. She asked, "Name?" And I said simply, "E. Holloway." She blinked, waited for more. But that was all I had. All I needed. Just that one initial. That bridge between everything I'd been. She wrote it down without comment. I slept dreamlessly that night. I spent the next few weeks on the road. I stayed in small towns, wrote in diners, let the landscape move around me like a river. I didn't run. I listened. Listened for the parts of myself I'd never had the space to hear before. She spoke softly at first, Eleanor, the girl on the stairs. Not like a ghost anymore. Not like a separate thing. But like memory growing roots in new soil. One morning, in a thrift store tucked off a winding main highway, I found an old Polaroid camera. I bought it without thinking. I started taking pictures of everything. Not to remember, but to see. Old houses with peeling shutters. Children's shoes left on porches. Wildflowers blooming from cracks in the pavement. I'd hold the photos as they developed, watching the images emerge like slow truths. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't just remembering someone else's life. I was building mine. Celine and I still spoke weekly. We had moved past the part where I questioned my sanity. Now we talked about ownership, integration, becoming. What name feels truest when you write? She asked once. I paused. Thought about the journals, the entries, the voice that came through strongest. Eleanor, I said. But also, I hesitated. Something new. Something between. Like what? I didn't have an answer then. But later that night, I pulled into a quiet overlook, the ocean stretching out below me like the end of everything. And I whispered the name into the wind. It wasn't Eleanor. It wasn't Jonas. It was something I'd never said before, but that felt right the moment it left my mouth. Elian. Not a boy. Not a girl. Not a ghost. Not a scar. Just a name I gave myself. Balanced. Honest. A tribute to who I had been. And who I would choose to be. The next morning, I changed the name on my ID. First time I'd ever walked into a government office without sweating through my shirt. I filled out the form. Waited in line. Signed my name. Elian Holloway. I handed over the form and looked the clerk straight in the eyes. And this time, when they called my name to the window, it rang true. The world didn't shift when I changed my name. The sky didn't open. No choir of ghosts applauded. But I shifted. I walked taller. Laughed easier. And when I passed by mirrors in gas station bathrooms or motel lobbies, I nodded at the reflection like seeing an old friend. One who had finally come home. I started writing again, not just in journals, but stories. Stories about memory. About identity. About the way we split ourselves to survive and stitch ourselves back together to live. People read them. Reached out. Said things like, I didn't know anyone else felt this way. Or, I never had the words until now. Each time, I felt Eleanor's hand on my shoulder. Not guiding, just witnessing. Proud. I went back to the cemetery in late May. Eleanor's grave was still there, still tucked in the corner. But I didn't cry this time. I knelt, ran my hand over the stone, and whispered, "You don't have to stay here." And maybe it was just the wind. Or maybe not. But I swear I heard her answer. "I haven't for a long time. I had a new stone made. Not to replace the old one. To add to it. A marker for the person who never got to be buried, because he was never truly born." Jonas Holloway. 1993 to 1999. Laid to rest with love. Because that's what it was, in the end. Not abandonment. Not erasure. Rest. I placed both names in the soil. Let them go. And walked away as Eleanor. Whole. My father never apologized. Not in life. Not in letters. Not even in the boxes of silence he left behind, all packed with worn-down pens and ghosts he didn't name. But I've started to hear him anyway, not in words but in absence. And that, I think, is its own kind of confession. There are things men like him aren't built to say. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I was wrong." Certainly not, "I was scared." So instead they say nothing, and the silence becomes an inheritance. I returned to the house one final time in early June. Just for a day. No ghosts. No hallucinations. Just me, and the echo of the man who once tried to rewrite a child's soul out of fear. I had something I needed to do. Not for him. For me. The study was exactly as I left it. Dust settled like snow over every surface. I opened his final journal. Not the one with theories and diagnoses. The other one. The one I hadn't read. The one bound in blue leather, frayed at the spine, as though it had been opened and closed 1,000 times by hands that weren't sure what they were doing. The handwriting inside was shaky. Sparse. Every few pages, a sentence. A fragment. Some almost unreadable. But the farther I read, the more I realized. This was his haunting. March 3rd. She asked me why she can't wear the dresses anymore. I didn't know what to say. April 9th. Caught her humming Jonas's lullaby. She doesn't remember me teaching it to her. May 17th. She asked if she was born twice. I told her no. I lied. July 1st. I don't know who she is anymore. She switches mid-sentence. Sometimes she calls me stranger. Sometimes Daddy. July 14th. I buried the name. I thought I was helping her. I don't know if she'll forgive me. August 30th. If she ever finds this, I hope she understands I couldn't let her become what I lost. November 11th. I think she already knows. That last line hit me hardest. Because by then, I think I did know. Not just what he had done, but why. He wasn't trying to erase her. He was trying to hold on. To Jonas. To the son he lost before he ever had one. To the illusion of control. And when he saw Eleanor split, when he saw the fragments he didn't understand, he panicked. He grabbed the only tools he had, naming, shaping, silencing. And in doing so, he carved a hollow into both of us. I sat in his old chair for hours that day. Let the sunlight move across the carpet like time passing in visible form. I imagined him there, in the quiet, trying to write an apology without the words. And I said into the stillness, "I'm not angry anymore." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was honest. I took the journal with me when I left. It's on a shelf now, beside mine. Not as a monument to pain, but as a record of trying, of failing, of loving in the most broken, human way. Sometimes I wonder if he knew the truth near the end. That Eleanor and Jonas were never meant to be separate. That I was never meant to be one or the other. That the child he raised, confused, stifled, misnamed, was still worthy of becoming whole. There are so many things he never said. He never told me about the first time Eleanor said she wanted to be both. He never told me what he saw in my eyes that scared him. He never said what he felt the day he decided to lie to my mother, or the night he buried the memory in a grave no one questioned. But I think he left me clues. Little ones. The way the pocket watch ticked just loud enough to be heard. The way the blue ribbon never rotted. The way the grave was hidden, but not unmarked. He didn't erase her entirely. He just couldn't carry her anymore. And hoped I might, one day, be strong enough to do it for both of us. I am. Sometimes I talk to him now. Not often. But when the night gets still, and the stars feel like eyes, I say things like, "You could have done better." And also, "I see the shape of your grief." And sometimes, maybe more than I'd admit aloud. "I wish you met me. The real me. Not the one you built out of ash and guilt and fear. But the one who rose anyway. Eleanor. It's not a name you ever would have chosen. But it's the one I earned. I left the house unlocked that day. A quiet act of rebellion. Let it breathe. Let the walls learn what it feels like to welcome someone, instead of just holding their secrets. Let it fill with light. Let the stairs creak under feet that belong. Let someone new write their name on the doorframe. And maybe, just maybe, when the wind comes through the windows at dusk, they'll hear a hum. Soft. Familiar. And they'll feel what I finally feel now. That the story has changed. And the silence no longer owns us. There's a myth about lost things. That they wait for us. In some quiet pocket of the world, intact and untouched. Like time is merciful and memory is a straight line. But that's not how it works. What's lost doesn't wait. It transforms. It becomes something else. And sometimes, if we're lucky, it becomes us. I used to think Eleanor was a ghost. A leftover. A haunting. But she wasn't. She was the part of me that stayed alive in hiding. The girl who refused to vanish. The child who wouldn't accept exile. She sat on the stairs not to scare me, but to remind me that I was never alone in my skin. Now I tell our story, not as a confession, not as a warning, as testimony to the quiet ones, the fractured ones, the ones who survived erasure by becoming more whole than the world allowed. I gave a talk last month at a university. Small group. Creative writing students, mostly. I stood at the front of a room that smelled like old books and ambition, and read a chapter from the memoir I never thought I'd finish. When I got to the part about the attic, the lace curtain, the mirror, the dress folded like a memory, I paused, looked up, saw a student wiping tears from their cheek. Afterward, they came up to me, voice soft with fear and hope mixed together. "Did it ever stop hurting?" they asked. And I didn't lie. "No," I said. "But it stopped being a wound. Pain doesn't vanish. It roots. It deepens. But when it has space, when it's seen, it becomes something else. Something that can nourish. Something that can grow." I moved to a new city after the book came out. Started over, for real this time. Not to forget. Not to outrun anything. But to build a life with no locked rooms. I have a partner now. She knows the whole story. Not just the cleaned-up version, but the ache and the night terrors and the time I stood in the shower at 3 a.m. sobbing because I found a blue ribbon under the sink and didn't know how it got there. She doesn't flinch. She stays. She reminds me, gently, that I'm real. That I'm here. That I belong in this life. We painted our hallway stairs yellow. Bright. Joyful. Every now and then, I sit on the third step with a cup of tea and just exist. No shadows. No voices. Just the hum of the heater and the distant sound of someone I love brushing their teeth in the next room. Peace, I've learned, isn't loud. It's present. I still talk to Eleanor. Not with words, always. Sometimes it's through music. Through dance. Through the stories I tell where she gets to live a life no one tried to rewrite. She's not a secret anymore. She's my origin. My persistence. My home. Sometimes people ask if I believe in past lives. And I say, I believe in reclaimed ones. A month ago, I went back to the house one last time. Not alone. I brought flowers. Yellow ones. I laid them on the front porch, tied with a ribbon, her ribbon, and whispered, "Thank you? Not for haunting me. For saving me. For staying until I could take the weight back myself." As I walked away, I didn't look over my shoulder. I didn't have to. I knew she wasn't behind me. She was within. And always had been. I don't need the stairs anymore. Because I don't sit at the edge of myself now. I live in the center. Full. Real. Named. My name is Eleanor Holloway. And I was never lost. I was waiting. Just like her.